welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and let's talk about the commanders from Bloomburrow. There are certainly a lot of them, as there typically is, and there's definitely some interesting ones. I'll just say right now, I won't be touching on any of the tribal ones at all. I don't really think there's a need to. I mean, you're going to be playing that tribe. Obviously, there's a huge tribal theme in this set, so a lot of these commanders are doing that. I just made the decision to not cover any of the tribal commanders because I just think there's a lot less to talk about with regards to those commanders. However, there are some real bangers from this set, so let's get to it. Baylen the Haymaker, red, green, white, rabbit warrior 4/3. Tap 2 untap tokens you control, add 1 mana of any color. Tap 3 untap tokens you control, draw a card. Tap 4 untap tokens you control, put 3+1/+1 counters on Baylen the Haymaker. It gains trample until end of turn. Ooh, boy. This might be my pick for the most popular from the set. You guys might be surprised to know that Naya is one of the most popular color combinations in the entire commander format. If you go check out my color combinations video, it doesn't have black or blue. So of course people love to play black and blue in the commander format, but it's just the commanders. There are so many really powerful Naya commanders. That's why that color combination is so popular. And a lot of them are dealing with token themes. This might be a commander that usurps a whole lot of those other token commanders. It is certainly going to go in the 99 of all those decks. All those Naya token decks, this is going to go in for sure in the 99, and a lot of people might take that commander out and put this in as the commander instead. There's just a lot of great value here. This is any kind of token. This is creature tokens, treasure tokens, clue tokens, right? So for that reason alone, you know, it's sort of like with Atraxa and Proliferate. Okay, I can do any theme encounters with Atraxa, whatever you want. You want to do a squirrel tribal deck? I mean, I guess you could if you want to do a nice squirrel tribal deck. That's a little weird. You certainly could do a rabbit tribal deck if there's enough rabbits to support that, because of course most of them are going to be tokens. Just start tapping down my rabbits to add mana or draw cards or put counters on my commander. I mean, putting 3 counters on your commander, it's now a 7/6 and then gets trampled until end of turn. That alone is pretty darn good, right? So you could definitely lean into the Voltron strategy here, but this is certainly one of the most powerful token commanders in the format now, I think, and it's going to be a popular one for sure. Ygra, I'm going to call this Eater of All, 3 black and a green elemental cat, 6/6. Ward, Sacrifice of Food, which typically would be obviously incredibly good. It would be practically hexproof because most people aren't going to have food and play to sacrifice. However, plays into the other ability here. Other creatures are food artifacts in addition to their other types and have pay 2, sacrifices permanent, gain 3 life like a typical food. Whenever a food is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put 2+1/+1 counters on Ygra, Eater of All. So this is incredibly powerful and might not seem like it at first. I think when most people see this at first, they're like, oh, that's kind of neat. And, I did too. I thought, okay, well, there's some really neat things you can do here, right? However, this is actually an insanely powerful ability. This turns all creatures in play into food artifacts in addition to their other types. So, of course, they're still creatures, right? Vorinclex is still a Vorinclex, still has its abilities, sure, all of that. However, it dies to a Bane of Progress, right? That's the big part here. This is Bane of Progress, and not only are you destroying everyone else's creatures, I guess you would destroy your own Bane of Progress, but who cares? But also, whenever a food is put into a graveyard, so once you've destroyed everyone else's creatures, you're going to pile counters on your commander and then probably likely one-shot somebody, right? I mean, you're getting 2+1/+1 counters essentially for every creature that has died. Now, I will say because your opponent's creatures are food, they can easily now sacrifice one of their creatures essentially in order to target your commander. But I mean, still, just the fact that I can, again, Creeping Corrosion, I believe, is another green spell that destroys all artifacts. There's a few ways to do that, right? Just the fact that all of your opponent's creatures are now artifacts. That, to me, is the big part here. All of your opponent's creatures are artifacts, so you just need to load up this deck with artifact removal. Piece of cake, right? Essentially, all your artifact and enchant removal now becomes artifact, enchantment, or creature because your commander turns everyone's creatures into artifacts. This could be a bit of an annoying one, I think. This is one of those ones that your commander makes it so easy for you to kill your opponent's creatures that people might be a little annoyed by this guy. Bello, Bard of the Brambles. This is an interesting one. 1 red, green, Raccoon Bard 3/3. During your turn, each non-equipment artifact and non-aura enchantment you control with mana value 4 or greater is a 4/4 elemental creature in addition to its other types and has indestructible haste. And whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So this takes some dissecting for sure. First of all, you can't just Dockside Extortionists create 20 treasure tokens and they're all 4/4s. No, it's got to be mana value 4 or greater. So they've already covered that. Tokens don't work here. So that is not going to be a scenario that you can use. Equipment aren't going to work and auras aren't going to work. So it has to be enchantments and it has to be artifacts and they have to be mana value 4 or greater. When I first saw this, I'm like, that's insanely busted, but it's actually very limiting. And for that reason, I like it. Like what directions are you going to go here? That's the funny thing I like about it. Obviously, you could just do whatever enchantment or artifact theme you want to do in Gruul Colors. And again, because this is Gruul Colors, it's a little weird, especially the enchantment theme, not so much in Gruul Colors, maybe the artifact. I guess they've been doing that a little bit more, but having artifact and or enchantment tribal in Gruul Colors alone is a little weird. You could do a little bit of elemental tribal stuff here for sure. There's definitely a lot of support for that in these colors. This is during your turn. So one thing you might want to look at is, I guess you would hit your commander. I was thinking like you could Starstorm and do board wipes on other people's turns because you wouldn't hit your stuff, but your commander would still be susceptible, but you could put a Darksteel Plate on it, right? You could build around that a little bit. It's an interesting one. This is one of the more interesting ones from the set, I think, and figuring out how exactly we're going to build around it. Beza, the Bounding Spring, I think is one that is certainly getting some buzz. 2 white, elemental elk, 4/5. And of course, as I mentioned in the last video, we got some wordy cards in this set, and the commanders are definitely not an exception there. When Beza, the Bounding Spring, enters, create a treasure token if an opponent controls more lands than you. So, of course, we've seen this effect a ton already in white. You gain 4 life if an opponent has more life than you. Create 2 1/1 blue fish creature tokens if an opponent controls more creatures than you. Draw a card if an opponent has more cards in hand than you. So that's doing a whole lot. However, I will point out, and I pointed out on my Discord when my patrons were talking about this, I said, yeah, if this card came out a couple of years ago, it would be a big deal. Now it's like, we have so many effects like this in white, it's not that big of a deal anymore. If we're talking about this card in the 99, a lot of people might grab this card for the 99 because it is going to give you a lot of value. It is possible you get all of these, right? So this enters the battlefield and you create a treasure token because I think likely you'll have an opponent with more lands than you. You're going to gain 4 life, and an opponent has more life than you. So if you get these all, you're going to get a treasure token, gain 4 life, create 2 fish tokens, and you get to draw a card. That's not bad. That's pretty good. And in fact, if I get to draw a card, because it's almost a guarantee, I think, I wouldn't say it's almost a guarantee, it depends on your deck, but it's likely you're going to have at least one opponent with more cards in hand than you. So you're going to get the card draw, and likely you're going to have an opponent with at least one opponent with more lands than you, and you're going to get the treasure token. So just to get a card draw and a treasure token is pretty good. But as a commander, what are we doing here, right? I would say if I was building this as a commander, first of all, obviously your commander is an ETB. So we want a blink, maybe a Panharmonicon, stuff like that. And mono white blink is very doable, obviously. Also, what I like here is and what I mentioned on the Discord, I like the sacrifice theme here. That would be neat. A mono white sacrifice theme, because of course, in order to get this stuff, we have to have the stipulation. So if I keep creating those fish, well, maybe I'll put stuff in my deck that is sacrificing creatures so that when I blink my commander, I don't have, because I'm creating a bunch of fish, I'm not going to get that trigger anymore. So now I can sacrifice those fish to some effect, or I can maybe discard cards to some effect so that I will get the card draw. Maybe I can pay life to some effect, right? So stuff like that. I think it would be neat to just throw a bunch of effects in there that are paying life, sacrificing stuff, all that kind of stuff, so that you're guaranteed getting the trigger off this guy. I don't think this is going to be a very popular commander. It likely, I think, in fact, guaranteed will be way more popular in the 99 for sure. Eluge, the Shoreless Sea. 1 blue, elemental fish, and has power and toughness each equal to the number of islands you control. Not too shabby. When Eluge enters or attacks, put a flood counter on target land. It's an island in addition to its other types for as long as it has a flood counter on. And of course, we actually recently got a commander that is dealing with flood counters. So again, whenever you have some commander that is referring to a certain kind of counter, you should always go down the rabbit hole and find out if there's any other cards that are referring to those kind of counters. Quicksilver Fountain, I will throw out there, is a card that can go in this deck that is dealing with flood counters that can be very relevant here. The first instant or sorcery spell you cast each turn costs 1 blue or 1 generic, because of course blue counts as generic as well. Less to cast for each land you control with a flood counter on it, so I think likely Quicksilver Fountain is certainly going to be fantastic in this deck. So, not super unique and exciting because, of course, we're just doing the instant sorcery thing and we're just reducing the cost. The fact that you can reduce the cost by a blue, though, is very relevant here, obviously. So all you have to do is have, I guess, 1 flood counter on a land that you control, because of course that last ability is looking for lands you control with flood counters on them. Yeah. So if this comes into play and you put a flood counter on one of your lands, of course, it's going to an island in addition to its other types. You can just put it on an island. It's not going to make a lick of difference here. So if your deck is filled with instants and sorceries that cost 1 blue, you can go off. And that might be a direction that people are going here, is they might just do that. We'll see. We'll see the direction that people go with it. Are people going to go? I mean, I think people definitely will go that direction with it. How powerful will it be? Will it be a commander that people are going to start complaining about because it's so easy to go off with it? That might be a possibility as well. We'll have to see. Maha, it's Feathers Knight. What a funny way to word that commander. Maha, it's Feathers Knight. Is that how you're supposed to say it? 3 black, elemental bird, 6/5, flying and trample. That's a big boy. Ward, discard a card. So your opponent's got to discard a card in order to target this. Creatures your opponents control have base toughness 1. Wow. Again, just like with Ygra, this is a very powerful ability. And again, it's going to make it so that this commander likely is going to be hated. It's probably going to be one of those commanders that, everyone's going to know, hey, you got a Knight of Soul's Betrayal in your deck. Everyone knows that, right? Everyone's going to know. So it's going to make it so that this is really going to be a hated commander, I think, just because that's the way you're going to build this deck. There's probably some more interesting ways you could build it, maybe not. I don't know. Creatures your opponent's controlling having base toughness 1 is just, okay, I'm just going to do -1/-1 counters. Creatures get -1/-1. Just make it really easy for you to kill your opponent's creatures. So for that reason, it's maybe going to be a little unfun to play against. Again, though, this is one that likely will go in the 99 of a lot of decks because it just enables a lot of things. I guess if you're doing Hapatra or something, right? Any -1/-1 counter deck, this guy's going to go in the 99 for sure. Even though this is a powerful effect, the fact that it's likely going to be very hated maybe will keep people away from playing it as a commander. But I think it's certainly going to go in the 99 of a lot of decks. Mr. Foxglove, 2 white, blue, green, Fox, Rogue, 3/5, lifelink. Whenever Mr. Foxglove attacks, draw cards equal to the number of cards in defending player's hand minus the number of cards in your hand. If you didn't draw cards this way, you may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. Ooh, boy. And I'll just say, another thing that is kind of bugging me a little bit is they're just automatically putting an evergreen ability on every legendary creature now. It's rare that you're going to see a legendary creature without an evergreen ability. They all have it. There is no reason for this guy to have lifelink. It has nothing to do with the ability. Maybe it's a flavor thing, I guess. And we already have a card that's really wordy here. Why do we have to have the lifelink? It seems silly to put that on there. This ability is, again, this is another commander that I would say fits into the category of, man, people might be going nuts over this guy, or people might just be ho-humming about this guy. He's going to attack, so we need to attack with our commander before we get anything out of this. You're always going to want to put the Lightning Greaves and the Swiftfoot Boots in a deck where you're doing that so you can get the trigger right away. You're going to draw cards equal to the number of cards in defending player's hand, so you're going to want to attack the guy that has a lot of cards in hand, I imagine, minus the number of cards in your hand, right? So you want that person to have more cards in hand than you, right? Maybe not. If you didn't draw cards this way. You may put a creature. Okay, so maybe not. I guess it depends on what's in your hand. So if your opponent has 7 cards in hand and you have 5, you'll draw 2 cards. If you didn't draw cards this way, so in other words, if I have 7 cards in hand and he has 7 cards in hand, you may put a creature card from your hand on the battlefield, which seems pretty amazing. So yeah, it's all amazing. It's like, okay, either I'm going to draw a bunch of cards or I'm going to put a creature from my hand into play. This, just like the mono white guy I was talking about, and I did the same thing with the, what's that mono blue dragon that is drawing, an amount of cards. You want less cards in hand, essentially. I did that there when I built that deck. You want to have discard outlets here, because now if I don't have anything in my hand that, if I have a giant creature I can throw into play, sure, you'll do that. But if I got a bunch of cards in hand and nobody has more cards in hand than me, I can now discard a bunch of cards to my mind over matter, for example, untap all my lands or something, and then refill my hand, right? So I think you probably want a discard outlet in this deck. Yeah, Bant Colors is good. This really great art too, by the way. As I've said, the art in this set, pretty fantastic. Drawing lots of cards or putting giant creatures into play, 2 things that everybody likes to do in a commander game. I think this is going to be a popular one, probably. Mrs. Bumbleflower. Okay, 1 white, green, and a blue. So another Bant Commander, Rabbit Citizen 1/5. Again, we got vigilance here for some reason. I don't know why it's got vigilance. It's got a whole lot of words on it, but we have to stick an evergreen ability on there for some reason. I don't know if it has anything to do with anything here. Whenever you cast a spell, target opponent draws a card. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. It gains flying until end of turn. If this is the second time this ability has resolved this turn, draw 2 cards. Oh boy. Man, this might be more popular than the other one. So whenever you cast a spell, so that's a pretty easy trigger to get, right? Target opponent draws a card. Okay, so we're letting our opponents draw cards. I guess if you have a huggy deck, like, man, this might even be better than a Feldergriff for those Bant hug decks. People might be swapping out. Hug decks tend to be a little on the goofy side already, so having a commander called Mrs. Bumbleflower sort of fits that. Feldergriff, same thing, right? Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature means you can put it on, of course, any creature, your opponent's or yours. Obviously, Generous Patron is going to be a slam dunk in this deck because, then it becomes a card draw for you. Just put it on their Wood Elves or something where it doesn't matter. I mean, there's a lot of ways to play around that. A lot of ways to play around putting a counter on either your opponent's creatures or yourselves. Obviously, there's a ton of creatures that you can put in this deck that you're going to want to put counters on. Absolute ton. So that's easy to build around there. That probably would be the thing I build around most is what creatures am I putting +1/+1 counters on? Because it's going to be happening all the time. Because it's every time you cast a spell. And then it gains flying until end of turn, also not bad. You could play around that as well. Like what you could do is put like a Cold-Eyed Selkie in the deck, put a counter on it. Of course, it draws that many cards. So having it bigger is, again, that's what I would build around more. And giving it evasion, obviously, is going to be good as well. Cephalid Constable. I always bring up those 2 cards as examples here because they have the that many phrase, which is so important. And put a +1/+1 counter on my Cephalid Constable makes it bigger, and the flying gives an evasion so I can more easily get in for damage with it. So that's how I'm building this deck. I'm probably more so going to concentrate on the creatures that I want to be putting counters on and giving flying to. And then if this is the second time this ability has resolved this turn, draw 2 cards. So if I cast another spell this turn, now I get to draw 2 cards. Oh boy. Yeah, this is going to be... Man, these 2 Bant commanders here, really popular ones, I think. This one's going to be popular in the format for sure, I think. All right, the infamous Cruelclaw, 1 black-red Weasel Mercenary 3/3. And again, just evergreen ability stapled on there. Although I would say this one is actually kind of relevant because whenever the infamous Cruelclaw deals combat damage to a player, exile cards from top of your library. Until you exile an on-land card, you may cast that card by discarding a card rather than paying its mana cost. Oh boy. So I guess the menace is kind of relevant here because you want to be getting in for combat damage with your commander, although they don't have to make it easier. We already have a really good ability here, right? Whenever this guy deals combat damage to a player, exile top card of your library until you exile an on-land card, so you're not going to hit a land. That's the only stipulation here. You're going to hit whatever else. So a little bit of top deck manipulation is, of course, going to be relevant. I just recently talked about Conchorn in a 10 cards video. I'm not sure if it actually has come out yet, but that card, and that's why I mention cards like that. I mention cards like that because I'm in a, a Rakdos deck where I don't have a lot of options for stuff like that. And now I can very easily take a really powerful card, really expensive card, like a Rise of the Dark Realms in my hand and put it on top of my library, right? And then just exile it, because obviously it's going to be the first card I exile from the top of my library, and cast that card by discarding a card rather than paying its mana cost. Oh boy, that's pretty powerful, right? And obviously you're also going to want to put a little bit of discard theme in here as well. I mean, why not get some more value out of discarding cards? Madness will work here, right? I'm Madness a card, and since I don't have to pay for the card I'm casting, I can pay for the Madness instead. Bone Miser, all that stuff, right? There's a lot of discard support in Rakdos colors. So yeah, put the big splashy cards in that you want to cast for free, but I think some discard support would be great here as well. Yeah, again, looks like it's going to be a popular one. It's doing some really powerful stuff, so it seems likely. The Odd Acorn Gang, and I know I wasn't going to talk about tribal stuff really, but this is the one where I think I really need to give it a mention. Oh boy, this guy is out of hand, I think. So 3 black, green, squirrel, warrior, 5/5, menace, trample, reach. That's a lot of abilities. Squirrels you control have tap. Target squirrel gets +2 against trample until end of turn. Activate only as a sorcery. Whenever one or more squirrels you control deal combat damage to a player, draw a card. So just a whole bunch of great squirrel tribal stuff. But of course, for me, the big one here is the fact that all your squirrels can give target squirrel +2/+2, and your commander, which is a squirrel, already a 5/5 with menace, trample, and reach. So I just tap 4 squirrels that I have, obviously just tokens, whatever, and I give my commander +8/+8. I mean, it's already got trample, but I've just given my commander +8/+8 by tapping 4 squirrels. And it's now a 13/13 menace, trample, reach. So that's insane, right? I know people say, hey, squirrel tribal, yay. But this to me is like an insane Voltron commander. And instead of putting in, all the typical Voltron stuff, you just put a bunch of squirrels in. The only thing you need to put in is stuff to protect your commander. Tameo, safekeeping, whatever. That's it. And then just a bunch of squirrel token makers. Like this guy, again, this is another commander that has a win con stapled on it. And then also, hey, I got to go draw a card as well. I know people will think, okay, I want to go in wide with all my squirrels and draw a bunch of cards, and you certainly could do that. It's kind of funny that we already have Toski, who's already a squirrel that's doing that. So this essentially has I guess it's 1 or more here. So yeah, you're not going to draw a ton of cards. The max here likely for you is going to be 3 if you hit 3 different opponents. So yeah, I wouldn't build around that. That's just an added bonus. I just make my commander huge and I'll one-shot people. And I also get a card draw off of it as well. Holy man. I mean, honestly, maybe Voltron's making a comeback here. Nobody's really prepared for it anymore because nobody really plays it. This could be a really good Voltron commander, in my opinion. Okay, this is an interesting one. Zinnia Valley's Voice, blue, red, white, bird, bard, 1/3 flying. Zinnia Valley's Voice gets +X/+O, where X is the number of other creatures you control with base power 1. So now we have base power 1 tribal. Again, as I've said so many times before, we will have a commander for every occasion eventually, right? The real interesting part here, though, is creature spells you cast have Offspring 2. And of course, that's the new ability from this set. You may pay an additional 2 as you cast a creature spell. If you do, when that creature enters, create a 1/1 token copy of it. So every creature spell you cast has essentially kicker 2, and when the kicker cost is paid, you get a 1/1 copy of it. Couple of things here I will point out, and maybe I should have pointed this out in the last video as well. You are creating tokens, right? The wording is always important here, right? Some of those effects, when you get the token copy of casting something, or it enters as a token copy of something, it's not actually creating. Here, we're actually creating, right? The wording here is, if you do, when that creature enters, so it's going to hit the battlefield, and it's like a trigger that creates a token copy of it, right? So obviously, we can do, I guess Parallel Lives doesn't work, Anointed Procession, right? You can do an Anointed Procession here because you are creating token copies, so you will create another one, right? So that's going to be a slam dunk in this deck. Any token creation stuff like Benny Brax would be a great card draw option in this deck. And then, the sky's the limit. And again, this is why this one, again, is probably likely going to be popular. I mean, the part about, your commander getting plus X plus O, where X is the number of creatures you control with base power 1, obviously that just works with the offspring. You can build around it, I guess, but I don't know, just makes your commander bigger. I wouldn't build around that at all. This to me is not base power 1 tribal. This to me is, I'm just going to put all the creatures in this deck that I want to get copies of. Eternal Witness, I cast my Eternal Witness, pay an extra 2. Now I get 2 Eternal Witnesses, right? ETB creatures are going to be particularly good here, I think. So it can get mana intensive, I will say. Now I'm paying 5 mana for my Eternal Witness. Yeah, that's a lot. So you're definitely going to have to work around that a little bit. It's definitely going to be, I guess you could do cost reductions here. You could do that. Having your creature spells cost less would certainly be really helpful here, without a doubt. It's an interesting one. I would say it's not super powerful, but I think because of the open-endedness of it, it's going to make it so that people probably want to go after it. All right, my pick for the most interesting commander from this set, and one that I will actually be building a deck with. I don't build decks from sets that much anymore. It used to be when a new set came out, I would build, that was the main purpose of my channel. I would build like 5 or 6 decks from all the different new commanders that came out. I think from my record, I think is from C21 and Strixhaven, which of course had a ton of commanders. I built like 12 decks from those 2 sets combined. I did a lot of deck techs on my channel. In fact, I did so many that I actually combined them into one video. Flubs the Fool is a really interesting commander, I think. And funny enough, it fits an idea that I came up with so long ago, which is why I'm going to be tackling this one myself. Blue, green, and a red, Frog Scout 05. You may play an additional land on each of your turns. Pretty good. Everybody wants to be doing that, right? Whenever you play a land or cast a spell, draw a card. Wow. If you have no cards in hand, otherwise discard a card. Wow. That's funny. And, obviously that is a potentially really powerful ability. And is it possible that someone figures out some sort of unique scenario here where they can just go off, as it were? And because you're going to be discarding a ton in this deck, you obviously will, again, be putting discard stuff. And, I can have like a Browlin in this deck. And of course, whenever I discard, all my opponents take a damage, and I can sort of play lands and cast spells and go off so that I draw a card and then play something. I guess if you have no cards in hand, I play a land, I'm going to draw a card because I have no cards in hand. Then I'm going to, you really got to think this guy through. That's why I like him. Then if I can, I've already played my lands, and I guess if it's a land in my hand and I've already played 2 lands, now I'm stuck, right? I guess if it's a land that I drew and I already played my 2 lands for a turn, now I'm stuck. You might want to throw an exploration in this deck and stuff like that so that you don't get stuck like that. If it's a spell, now I can cast the spell. And again, now I'm empty-handed again. Draw cards, right? There's a lot you can do here. And of course, I will be touching on the idea that I went with here. I already had this idea for a deck, essentially. So I will be covering that likely in the next video if you're at all interested. But I love the situation you put yourself in here. You're sort of in a box where, well, if I have cards in hand, then I discard a card, right? If you have, you're not typically empty-handed in a commander game, right? So if I have 5 cards in hand, this actually becomes really bad, right? Because I play my land for turn. Okay, this triggers. I have 5 cards in hand. So of course, and now I have to discard a card. Right? So all people thinking, man, they're so busted, all the things you can do here. It can be really bad too. If I just play my land for turn, I now have to discard a card. You're going to be discarding a lot in this deck. Be prepared for that. You definitely have to be prepared for that eventuality. Super interesting commander, though, I think. All right, that is it. That is all. Those are, I think, the commanders that are worth talking about, at least the ones I wanted to talk about from this set. Pretty good set overall. Again, I will be throwing out that Flubs the Fool deck tech, I think, right away. And Also, I think what I will be doing going forward is talking about the cards that I'm actually going to get for myself. You know, I did make a video a little while ago talking about how I might stop buying new Magic cards. I have bought a few. I'm definitely buying a lot less than what I was doing. It was getting out of hand there for a while. So I think I will also make a video, probably likely, talking about the cards that I will be purchasing from this set. You guys let me know in the comments below the commanders that you're going to be wanting to build around from this set. That is it for today, though, and thanks for tuning in.